What's up, everybody? It's the Digital World Podcast. And this is, one massive tragedy after another. And I'm going to go ahead and discuss this article. Then I'm going to talk about what you can do because I received a comment on how can we prepare, right? Because the signs, if you listen to the mainstream media narrative, you're going to get one story. But when you look and search for those alternative resources, those channels, or the people that are talking about what's actually happening, right? They're either shut off, right? And I got to be careful with how I say things, right? Because there's a lot of stuff going on where people's voices are not being heard, okay? And I want to make sure I get this news story to you guys because censorship is real. But nevertheless, there's a lot of climate events taking place. And I've shown you videos of a senator back in 1995 talking to a gentleman. And the gentleman discussed the um, the fact that there is weather technology. And this was back in 95. Can you imagine what it's like now? Here it says Brazilian dams break, 10 more at risk of collapse amid heavy rain. So when you see massive dams that are next to a major town or city, you best believe that at some point in time, those are going to collapse. If these things keep happening, they're going to collapse. I know in China, there's major dams that have been talked about before. So if you live near one of these major dams, I would reconsider my location because you're starting to see that these are common occurrences. Here we see on Saturday night the Igua Dam on the Verruga River near Vitoria de Conquista in southern Bahia collapsed. The second dam broke. So this is the second dam. Broke about 62 miles to the north on Sunday morning. Jeez, and look at this devastation. You don't think that's taking away people's homes, people's clothes, food, right? If they farmed anything in that area, it's gone, destroyed. It says the floods have affected 40 cities. At least 35,000 people have been displaced from their homes. That's a big number, folks. Huge number. To call this a tragedy is an understatement. Because you have 35,000 people that are going to be living, and especially if it's probably more warm climate around those parts. I know they do have some areas where there's cold climates. But still, you don't have a home. And it really is terrifying. Like it says here, everything's underwater. The authorities declared a state of emergency in 72 cities. It says floodwaters in certain parts of the state reaching as high as 30 feet. Wow. Check this video out. Everything's just completely underwater. And there's critters and stuff and snakes in those areas. So you got to be careful too. Everything is gone, destroyed. This is not this is not like the U.S. This country's poor. The resource that they have available to them is not what it would be here, right? So you can just imagine the devastation. Completely gone. Aerial view. Just look at all those homes. It's just completely wiped out. And it looks like it's going slow, but these are fast. You get wiped by one of these, you could probably drown. Jeez. There's some more here. Probably looking to see people to rescue, right? Because they're trapped. They're helping that gentleman up. Or at least, they got him in, helped him out. I mean, you can just see the devastation. And this is going to take a long time to recover. So these people are they're homeless. That's what it is. They're homeless. Very homeless. And this is going to become a common occurrence because you can see that narrative being pushed and about weather disasters. And this actually is a reason why I decided to cover something like this today, because we need to talk about what you can do. Look at that. What you can do to prepare, because right now, as I mentioned in yesterday's video, the markets are at all-time highs, and there's eerie similarities between the stock market of the Roaring 20s, right, heading into the Great Depression, and the market today. Okay, so here's another video. Look at that bunch of kids, it's just saddening. The markets are very similar to what it was back in the 20s. And what's going to be interesting is how this all plays out, because if you mix in weather disasters, right, along with an economic crash, can you imagine the tragedy and the devastation on people for just knowing that they've lost everything, right? So, ways you can prepare. Now, everyone's situation financially and geographically is different. And one thing that I was mentioning in one of my previous videos was you got to look at your geographical location. Look around it. You have dams that can, if they broke, it would just completely wipe out the entire town or city that you're in, right? Is there massive flooding due to heavy rainfall, whatever? And once you look at those things, you got to decide for yourself, in the long term, if there was a grid down scenario, would I be able to grow food, take care of my family? And of course, the financial aspect is another thing. And being able to move, it's a huge part of what your plan is. If you can't move because, financial reasons or family or job, whatever, you at least know a friend or a family where you could go to in the event that something happens, or before something happens. So if you're located in an area where you can grow your own food, you'll be safe in a grid down scenario, then you'll be fine. I recently talked about watching a video by Southern Prepper One, where he said, you look at the areas that people lived in the 1800s, right? And when you look at those areas that people lived back then, if they're sustainable for life, then you're going to be okay. Because back then they didn't have everything we have today. And you got to think of it the same way. Look at your geographical area and figure out if life was sustainable there in the 1800s. Because if that was the case, then in the event that a grid down scenario happens, you'll be fine and you'll be able to survive, decently well. Okay, so those are the things you got to look at. If you find yourself in a situation where you can't move, you don't really have much to grow and stuff like that, well, you might start looking at, hey, maybe I need to invest in a few items, um, store some food, little things like that. And one of the things that me and my family have been doing is, well, we got to learn how to can really well, right? Buying little things here and there. For example, if you live in an area where it's cold, make sure you have enough warm clothing, right? It starts with little things like that. You can't all of a sudden get everything. No, you got to start little by little and build on that. Okay? And then you might want to buy some flashlights, etc. So you build on these little things. But most importantly, you got to look at your geographical location. If you have the means to um, move because of where you live, then that's something you'll decide with your family. If you don't, then plan accordingly. There's many videos on people who talk about how to store food, right? By canning. That's something that's really important. So, if you think this video has been helpful, let me know. Maybe I can do some more things like that to talk about different topics that people are wondering about. Maybe I can get into more detail about it. But make no mistake that all the narratives put together, it's gonna make for one crazy, crazy Great Depression, one like the world has never seen before. And this is worldwide. So, with that in mind, this is the Digital World Podcast, and I'll see you in the next episode.